What would you do if you stumbled upon 3 starving children, shivering in the rain, their eyes pleading for help? Picture yourself standing at the crossroads of your life, your empire teetering, your legacy on the line, and 3 small faces looking to you for salvation. This is the story of Julian Hawthorne, a billionaire whose name towers over Manhattan's skyline, but whose heart is about to be broken and rebuilt by a single rainy night. Welcome to Daily Narrated Stories, where we bring you tales that stir the soul and ignite the spirit. Tonight, we dive into a journey of sacrifice, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Buckle up, this one will leave you breathless. The storm raged against the glass walls of Julian's office, high on the 60th floor of Hawthorne Tower. At 47, Julian had forged Hawthorne Global into a multi-billion-dollar empire, rising from a small-town dreamer to a titan of industry. His sharp jaw and piercing eyes commanded boardrooms, but tonight, his mind churned with unease. Cassandra Langston, his former partner of 10 years, had turned adversary, her words from their last meeting a venomous sting. "You're losing your edge, Julian." Rain lashed the windows, mirroring the turmoil in his chest as he stared at the city below, its lights blurred into rivers of gold. "Sir, the quarterly projections need your signature," said Lila, his assistant, placing a stack of documents on his polished mahogany desk. Julian barely glanced up, waving her off. The board meeting had been a battlefield, Cassandra's accusations of his distracted leadership slicing deep. She was hungry for control, ready to dismantle the empire he'd bled for. "Will you need the car tonight, Mr. Hawthorne?" asked Marcus, his driver of 12 years, his voice steady as always. 20 minutes, Julian replied, his tone clipped, his thoughts a tangle of strategy and betrayal. Outside, the October chill cut through his tailored coat as he stepped from the tower's marble lobby. His bespoke shoes sank into a puddle, the cold seeping into his bones, amplifying his scowl. That's when he saw them. 3 small boys, no older than 7, huddled in the shadowed doorway of a shuttered bookstore across the street. Identical in their soaked, threadbare jackets, their faces pale and sunken, they trembled against the wind. One held a crumpled coffee cup, extending it to passers-by who hurried past, heads bowed against the storm. Julian's instinct was to look away, not his problem. Cassandra's corporate coup and a looming investor meeting demanded his focus. But the smallest boy's gaze locked onto his, a flicker of hope tangled with despair, and something cracked in Julian's hardened heart. He crossed the street, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his pulse quickening with each step. "Why aren't you home?" he asked, his voice sharper than intended, rain dripping from his coat. The boy with the cup met his eyes, unflinching. "We need money for food, sir. We haven't eaten since yesterday." Julian studied them closer. Triplets, unmistakably, their thin frames swallowed by clothes too flimsy for the biting cold. A fresh bruise darkened the cheek of the boy on the left, a silent accusation that twisted Julian's gut. "Where are your parents?" he pressed, his breath visible in the frigid air. The boys exchanged wary glances, their bond palpable. "Mom's gone," whispered the middle one, his voice barely audible over the storm. "And Cal says we can't come back without enough cash." The sleek black Rolls-Royce purred to the curb, its headlights cutting through the downpour. "Sir," Marcus called, holding the door, his face unreadable. Julian stood frozen, rainwater streaming down his face, the triplets' hollow eyes boring into him. Logic screamed to call social services and move on. His company was under siege, his legacy at stake. But those faces, fearful yet defiant, stirred something long dormant, a whisper of compassion he'd buried beneath years of ambition. What would you do in Julian's shoes? Walk away, trusting the system to save the boys, or take a risk and change their lives tonight? Drop your choice in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. And please, hit that subscribe button for daily narrated stories. We're inches from 1,000 subscribers, and your support brings these transformative tales to more hearts. Let's make it happen together. Are you hungry? Julian heard himself ask, the words foreign, as if spoken by someone else. 3 heads nodded in unison, their eyes wide with cautious hope, rain glistening on their lashes. "Marcus, change of plans," Julian called, gesturing to the boys. "We're stopping at the diner." Marcus's brow furrowed, but he nodded, opening the car door. The triplets hesitated, clutching each other, their breath fogging in the cold, before following Julian into the warmth of the Rolls-Royce, their sneakers squeaking on the leather seats. At the 24-hour diner, Julian watched, stunned, as the boys devoured stacks of pancakes, bacon, and milkshakes, their small hands moving with desperate precision. The waitress, Rosie, her eyes kind beneath a halo of gray curls, cast sympathetic glances their way, clearly puzzled by the sight. A sharply dressed tycoon with 3 ragged children. The clatter of plates and the hum of late-night conversations filled the air, but Julian's world narrowed to the boys. He broke the silence, his voice softer now. "You're triplets, right? What are your names?" The boy with the bruise spoke first, his voice steady despite the mark on his cheek. "I'm Caleb." "I'm Owen," said the one who'd held the cup, wiping syrup from his chin with a napkin. "Elliot," whispered the smallest, his voice barely audible, his eyes darting to his brothers for reassurance. "And how old are you?" Julian asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious. "7. They answered together, then burst into giggles, a bright, childlike sound that pierced the diner's hum and tugged at something deep in Julian's chest, a warmth he hadn't felt since childhood. Outside, the rain roared, hammering the diner's fogged windows, the neon sign casting a red glow across their table. Julian glanced at his watch, past midnight. His penthouse, a sterile fortress of glass and steel, awaited, its silence a weight he'd long accepted. The thought of returning to it now twisted his gut, the emptiness more oppressive than ever. "Where does Cal live?" he asked carefully, his fingers tightening around his coffee mug. The boys' laughter died, their faces closing like shutters. 47th and Elm, Caleb said, his voice flat, his eyes on the table. The place with the busted stairs. Julian's jaw clenched, his mind conjuring images of that neighborhood. A labyrinth of crumbling tenements and flickering streetlights, notorious for its dangers. "He'll be mad if we don't bring enough money," Owen whispered, his fingers twisting the edge of his napkin until it tore. Rosie approached with the bill, her smile soft, her apron stained with coffee. "Your boys are adorable," she said, her warmth genuine. Julian opened his mouth to correct her, then stopped, the word boys settling into him like a truth he hadn't yet named. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling strangely right, a quiet acknowledgement of the shift within him. A thunderclap rattled the windows, and Elliot flinched, scooting closer to Julian's side, his small shoulder brushing Julian's arm. "Just thunder," Julian said, his voice awkward, unpracticed at comfort, his hand hovering before resting lightly on Elliot's back. "Nothing to fear." His phone buzzed. Cassandra, no doubt, with another veiled threat about tomorrow's board meeting, her ambition a constant shadow. He silenced it, his focus locked on the boys, their presence a tether in the storm. "Listen," he said, surprising himself, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "This storm's too dangerous, and it's late. My place has plenty of room. Want to stay tonight? Just until morning?" The triplets shared a silent, almost telepathic look, their eyes flickering with a language only they understood. "Cal checks on us at noon," Caleb said cautiously, his tone that of a protector, too old for his years. "I'll deal with Cal," Julian replied, a protective edge sharpening his voice, a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. Marcus raised an eyebrow as Julian emerged with the boys, their small figures dwarfed by the towering lobby, but he said nothing, guiding them into the Rolls-Royce. "Is this a spaceship?" Elliot whispered, his awe pulling a rare chuckle from Julian, the sound foreign in his throat. The private elevator to Julian's penthouse hummed upward, the boys' eyes wide at the marble and chrome, their reflections distorted in the polished walls. Julian realized with a jolt that his pristine home, designed for solitude, its minimalist lines a testament to control, had never hosted children. His housekeeper, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, would be apoplectic, her British propriety no match for this chaos. As the doors opened to the sprawling foyer, Caleb gasped, his voice barely a breath. "This is like a palace from my storybook." Julian's chest warmed, a foreign sensation that spread like wildfire, chasing away the cold. "Just for tonight," he said, as much to himself as to them, though a whisper in his heart doubted the words. The next morning, Mrs. Carter's jaw dropped at the sight of 3 identical boys eating cereal at the kitchen island, their spoons clinking against bowls. Julian in a rumpled shirt attempting to make toast, the bread slightly charred. "Mr. Hawthorne, I wasn't informed of guests," she said, her British accent straining to mask her shock, her hands smoothing her apron. "Emergency situation," Julian said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "One night only." Mrs. Carter's eyes softened as she noticed the boys' worn clothes, the soles of their sneakers peeling, and Caleb's fading bruise, a silent story of neglect. "I'll prepare a proper breakfast," she declared, already bustling toward the stove, her sleeves rolled up with purpose. While the boys devoured waffles, syrup dripping onto their chins, Julian slipped into his study, the walls lined with leather-bound books and awards glinting in the morning light. He made calls, his voice low, urgent. First, he rescheduled his morning meetings, ignoring Lila's surprise. Then he contacted his security chief, Victor, his tone clipped. "I need everything on a man named Cal, 47th and Elm. Likely abusing 3 kids. Keep it quiet." Returning to the kitchen, he found the boys helping Mrs. Carter with dishes, their small hands scrubbing plates, a task Julian had never done, his life outsourced to staff. "We should go," Caleb said, his voice heavy, his eyes on the floor. "Cal checks soon." Julian hesitated, an unfamiliar reluctance gripping him, his heart tugging against logic. "How about new clothes first?" he suggested, the idea forming as he spoke. Before the boys could answer, the intercom buzzed, Victor's voice crackling through. "Ms. Langston is here, sir. She's demanding to see you." Cassandra, her timing impeccable, as always. Julian sighed, nodding to Mrs. Carter, who ushered the boys to the kitchen, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. Cassandra swept in, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble floor, her tailored suit a weapon of precision. "You skipped the Nakamura meeting," she said icily, her eyes glinting with accusation. "The investors are livid, Julian." Her gaze caught the cereal bowls, scattered crumbs a stark contrast to the penthouse's perfection. "What's this? Babysitting now?" Her voice dripped with disdain, each word a calculated jab. "It's complicated," Julian replied, his patience fraying, his hands clenching at his sides. Elliot appeared in the doorway, clutching a juice carton, his small frame dwarfed by the grandeur. "Mr. Julian, can I have more?" He froze at the sight of Cassandra, his eyes wide with fear. Cassandra's perfectly sculpted brows arched, her lips curling into a predatory smile. "Triplets? How quaint." Julian stepped protectively toward Elliot, his body a shield. "We'll discuss business tomorrow, Cassandra." Her smile sharpened, a blade unsheathed. "The board meets in 2 hours. Your control hangs by a thread, and you're playing daddy?" She leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. "What's your angle, Julian?" "No angle," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Now please leave." After Cassandra's departure, her threats lingering like smoke, Julian knelt before the boys, their faces etched with worry, their bond a silent fortress. "Are we causing trouble?" Owen asked, his voice small, his fingers twisting his sleeve. Julian should have said yes. These children were appending his life, jeoparding Cassandra's attacks, threatening his empire. Instead, he found himself saying, "Some things matter more than meetings." And, to his shock, he meant it, the words a vow he hadn't planned to make. Julian adjusted his tie, the silk smooth under his fingers, as the elevator climbed to the Hawthorne Global Boardroom, its walls gleaming with corporate power. For the first time in decades, he felt unsteady, the triplets fidgeting beside him in new clothes, simple, sturdy outfits bought in a frantic morning shopping spree after Mrs. Carter pointed out their tattered ones, the soles flapping like broken wings. "Remember our plan?" Julian asked softly, his voice a lifeline in the rising tension. Caleb nodded, his face serious. "Sit quietly in your office with Mrs. Carter. Don't touch anything fancy," Owen added, his eyes scanning the elevator's polished buttons. "And be good," Elliot finished, flashing a shy smile that melted Julian's resolve. The elevator doors parted, revealing Lila's stunned expression, her clipboard trembling. "Mr. Hawthorne, the board's waiting," and her eyes widened at the boys, their identical faces a shock against the corporate sterility. "These are my guests," Julian said firmly, his tone brooking no argument. "Show them to my office." Whispers trailed them down the corridor, the corporate rumor mill churning, secretaries pausing mid-type. Cassandra emerged from the boardroom, her smile freezing, her eyes narrowing to slits. "You brought them here?" she hissed, her voice a whip crack. "Are you trying to tank your reputation?" "No childcare options," Julian replied coolly, his calm a mask for the anger simmering beneath. "This is what I've warned the board about," Cassandra snapped, her heels clicking as she stepped closer. "Your judgment's compromised. First the Nakamura deal, now this circus." Anger flared in Julian's chest, hot and unyielding. "Those circuses have names, Cassandra." Inside the boardroom, 14 executives fell silent as Julian entered, their faces a mix of curiosity and disapproval. Chairman Everett Stone raised an eyebrow, his voice dry. "Julian, we wondered if you'd grace us." "Apologies for the delay," Julian said, taking his seat at the head of the table, the weight of their stares heavy. Cassandra stood, her voice cutting through the silence. "There's an elephant in the room, or rather, 3 small ones. Julian's apparently adopted children without board consultation." Murmurs rippled, pens tapping nervously. "My personal life isn't your business," Julian said, his tone iron. "It is when it clouds your decisions," Cassandra countered, her eyes glinting. "The Nakamura deal collapsed because of your absence." "The deal was overpriced," Julian shot back, his voice steady, his research a shield. "Their financials were a house of cards." "Convenient," Cassandra sneered, her smile a blade. "I propose we explore interim leadership while Julian handles his domestic distractions." A crash echoed from Julian's office, followed by a child's cry, sharp and piercing. Without a word, Julian stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Julian, we're voting," Cassandra called, her voice sharp with triumph. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Then vote. Some things are more important." In his office, Elliot sobbed over a shattered glass sculpture, its shards glinting on the carpet like fallen stars. Mrs. Carter was already sweeping, her movements brisk but gentle. "I just wanted to see it," Elliot hiccuped, his tears streaking his face. Julian knelt beside him, his voice soft, a stark contrast to the boardroom's edge. "It's just a thing, Elliot. Things can be replaced." The words felt alien. Julian Hawthorne, the man who prized perfection, dismissing a broken treasure, his heart choosing the boy over the artifact. Julian's penthouse began to transform, subtle at first, then undeniable. White leather sofas gained colorful cushions, their hues a rebellion against sterility. The kitchen, once a shrine to artisanal coffee, now held boxes of cartoon-shaped cereal, their bright packaging a child's defiance. Laughter, bright, unpolished, filled spaces that had known only silence, echoing off marble walls. "Mr. Julian, look," Elliot called from the living room, balancing a wobbly tower of blocks, his grin infectious. "1 second," Julian replied, finishing a call in his study, the room's oak shelves now dotted with the boy's drawings, a quiet invasion of joy. He'd started working from home 3 days a week, a decision that baffled his old self, the man who lived for boardroom conquests. Mrs. Carter entered with tea, her tray steady despite her raised brow. "The boys need school supplies," she said casually, her tone implying more than her words. "If they're staying longer." Julian's head snapped up, his pen pausing mid-signature. "It's temporary," he said, though the words lacked conviction, his heart whispering a different truth. Mrs. Carter's knowing smile irked him, her eyes seeing too much. "Of course, sir. Temporary. Like the doctor's appointment tomorrow and the bunk beds arriving today." Victor called, his voice low, urgent. "Cal Dorsey, 3 fraud convictions, on probation. Took the boys in after their mother, his girlfriend, not their mom, died last year. Neighbors confirm abuse. He forces them to beg, takes their money." Julian's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles whitening. "Options. CPS could step in, but foster care might split them," Victor said, his tone heavy. The thought of the triplets separated twisted Julian's heart, a pain sharper than any corporate loss. At dinner, Mrs. Carter served a family-style meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a stark contrast to Julian's usual solitary plate, eaten standing at the counter. The boys' personalities shone. Caleb, the protector, ensuring his brother's plates were full. Owen, the thinker, arranging his beans in a perfect grid. Elliot, the dreamer, narrating a tale of dinosaurs invading the table. Do we have to go back to Cal soon? Owen asked, his fork still, his eyes searching Julian's face. The question hung heavy, the air thick with unspoken fears. 9 days had passed, far beyond temporary. Not yet, Julian said carefully, his voice a lifeline. We can't stay forever, Caleb said, his practicality a child's shield against hope. This isn't our home. Julian's throat tightened, emotion clawing at his chest. Logically, the boys were a liability, disrupting his work, fueling Cassandra's attacks, threatening his legacy. Yet, watching Elliot mimic a dinosaur eating broccoli, Owen's meticulous pea arrangement, and Caleb's quiet vigilance, Julian felt a seismic shift, a reordering of his world. You can stay as long as you need, he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them, a vow sealed in the warmth of their gazes. Peace shattered one afternoon when Mrs. Carter called during a critical investor call, her voice frantic. Sir, Cal Dorsey's here, making threats. Security's holding him in the lobby, but he's screaming about kidnapping and the police. Ice flooded Julian's veins, his pulse a drumbeat. I'm coming. Keep the boys in the game room. Don't tell them. He arrived to find Cal, a wiry man with bloodshot eyes and a sneer, pacing the lobby, flanked by guards, his boots scuffing the marble. You Hawthorne, Cal snarled, his voice a rasp, his finger jabbing the air. Where are my kids? Julian approached, fury barely leashed, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Cal's stained jacket. They're not yours. Not after what you've done to them. Cal sneered, his lips curling. Their mom left them to me. They're my cash cows, and I want him back. Those cash cows are children you've starved and beaten, Julian said, his voice deadly quiet, each word a blade. Prove it, Cal taunted, his eyes glinting with malice. Meanwhile, I'll tell the cops a billionaire snatched my kids. Bet your board'll love that headline. The threat landed like a guillotine, sharp and final. Cassandra was already exploiting Julian's distractions, her claws deep in the board. A scandal could finish him, toppling his empire. How much? Julian asked coldly, his voice a mask for the disgust churning within. Cal's eyes gleamed, a predator scenting blood. $500,000 cash. I vanish, papers and all. You'd sell children? Julian's voice trembled with contempt, his fists clenching. You're buying them, ain't you? Cal shot back, his grin a twisted mirror. Julian's phone buzzed. Cassandra, emergency board vote in 1 hour. Be here or lose everything. The timing was a vice, squeezing his options. If he missed the vote, Cassandra would seize control, 20 years of work obliterated. But if he left, Cal might slip through, his threats a noose around the boys. Security, escort him out, Julian ordered, his voice steel. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. Touch those boys, and you're done. As Cal was dragged away, shouting curses, Cassandra called, her voice ablade. The vote's starting, Julian. Where are you? Julian glanced at the elevator, picturing 3 boys who trusted him, their faces a beacon in the storm. Handling something more important, he said, and hung up, the click a declaration. Upstairs, the triplets were building a pillow fort, their laughter a fragile shield against the chaos below, oblivious to Cal's venom. Mr. Julian, you're back early. Elliot beamed, his eyes bright with joy, a block clutched in his small hand. Julian's heart clenched, the weight of his choice settling into him. His company might fall today, but these boys would never feel abandoned again, their trust a treasure he'd guard with his life. In his study, Julian assessed the damage, the oak desk strewn with reports. The board had stripped his operational control, handing Cassandra the reins, her victory a cold blade in his side. Yet, strangely, he felt no regret, the loss paling against the boy's presence. A knock broke his thoughts. Caleb stood in the doorway, his face solemn, too old for 7. Mrs. Carter said you're not the boss anymore. Because of us. Julian beckoned him in, his voice gentle. It's not your fault, Caleb. It's complicated. We should go back to Cal so you can fix it, Caleb said, his voice breaking with a child's learned self-sacrifice, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Never, Julian said fiercely, his hand on Caleb's shoulder, grounding them both. Cal's dangerous. Caleb's eyes searched his, piercing and wise. Why were you helping us? Really? The question stunned Julian, a mirror to his own heart. 3 weeks ago, he'd have ignored street kids, their plight a footnote in his conquests. What had changed? Before he could answer, Victor arrived, a file in hand, his face grim. The info you asked for. After Caleb left, Julian opened it. Birth certificates, the mother's death certificate, and a photo of a young woman with 3 newborns, her smile hauntingly familiar. His phone rang. His lawyer, Naomi, her voice urgent. "I've filed for temporary guardianship. Cal's record helps, but he's threatening a kidnapping story, shopping it to tabloids." "Handle it," Julian said, his eyes on the photo. "Whatever it takes." Why did she look familiar? A commotion from the living room interrupted, the sound of small voices and clattering objects. Owen was emptying a worn shoebox onto the carpet, its contents spilling like secrets. "Our treasure box," Elliot explained, his voice reverent. "Mom's stuff." The items were meager. A locket, a faded scarf, a few photos, and a stack of letters, their edges yellowed. "She wrote to our dad," Owen said softly, his fingers tracing an envelope. His name was Daniel. Julian froze, the name a lightning bolt. Daniel, his twin brother, dead 8 years in a sailing accident. His loss a wound Julian had never healed. "May I see?" he asked, his voice hoarse, his hands trembling. The boys nodded, their trust a gift. Julian opened a letter, dated 9 years ago, the ink faded but legible. "Dearest Daniel, the boys are growing so fast, with your smile." His breath caught, his heart pounding as he stared at the triplets, seeing it now. The Hawthorne jaw, Daniel's piercing eyes, the cowlick in their dark hair. These weren't strangers. They were his nephews, Daniel's sons, his own blood. The truth hit like a tidal wave, reshaping his world, his purpose, his heart. "Did you know our dad?" Owen asked, his voice cutting through the charged silence, his eyes searching. Julian's voice faltered, the weight of years pressing down. How could he explain losing Daniel to his reckless adventures, their paths diverging before his death, their last words a fight Julian regretted every day? "Yes," he managed, his throat tight. "Very well. Was he nice?" Elliot asked, his voice hopeful, his small hand clutching the locket. "The kindest," Julian said, emotion choking him, tears pricking his eyes. "Brave, always laughing. You have his eyes, all 3 of you." "If you knew our dad," Caleb said slowly, his voice careful, "and we're staying with you. Are you like our uncle?" The word uncle resonated through Julian, a chord struck deep within. "Something like that," he said softly, his voice a whisper of truth. The elevator chimed, and Julian tensed, expecting Cal's return, but Mrs. Carter entered with Naomi, her face grimly triumphant. "Urgent news," Naomi said. "Cal's been arrested for probation violation, caught trying to sell the boys' guardianship to a tabloid. We've got proof." Relief surged, a wave breaking over Julian, followed by resolve, a fire kindled. "File for adoption," he said, the words spilling out, his heart outpacing his mind. "Adoption," Elliot echoed, his eyes wide, hope flickering in their depths. Julian realized he'd spoken aloud, his heart's decision laid bare. "If you want," he added, his gaze meeting their hopeful faces, their trust a mirror to his own longing. In a moment etched into his soul, 3 small bodies tackled him, arms wrapping around his neck and waist, laughter and tears mingling in a chaotic, perfect embrace. "Forever?" Elliot asked, his voice muffled against Julian's chest. "Forever," Julian confirmed, a dam breaking inside him, years of solitude washing away. That night, Julian pored over old photos of himself and Daniel, their identical faces a mirror of the triplets, their childhood a tapestry of shared secrets and promises. He remembered a summer day, age 10, when they'd hidden in their treehouse, Daniel's laughter bright as they vowed to always protect each other. That promise, long buried, pulsed through him now, tying him to these boys. His phone rang. "Cassandra," her voice cold. "The investors are pulling out. You've got 24 hours." Julian barely registered her words, his focus on the boys sleeping down the hall, their soft breaths a new rhythm to his life. A week later, temporary guardianship was secured, DNA tests confirming the boys were Daniel's, their lineage a bridge to the brother Julian had lost. But as his personal life stabilized, his company crumbled, the cracks widening. Stocks are down 15%. His CFO warned, his voice tinny through the phone. Clients are jittery. Mrs. Carter appeared, her face grim, her apron twisted in her hands. Child Protective Services is here for an unscheduled inspection. Julian's gut twisted. Cassandra's handiwork, a calculated strike. The CPS worker, Ms. Torres, was brisk, her notepad a weapon. Concerns have been raised about your home, Mr. Hawthorne. You've no parenting experience, yet you've taken in 3 children. Julian led her through the penthouse, now alive with bunk beds, desks, and toys, the sterile edges softened by the boys' presence. They're my nephews, he explained, his voice steady despite the scrutiny. Before he could elaborate, Elliot burst in, his face pale. Mr. Julian, Caleb's hurt. In the living room, Caleb clutched his arm, his face ashen, pain etching lines too deep for a child. Fell off the couch, he gritted out, his teeth clenched. Julian scooped him up, his heart pounding. Hospital now? Mrs. Carter, see Miss Torres out. This isn't finished, Miss Torres protested, her pen poised. My nephew comes first, Julian said, striding out, Caleb's weight a grounding force. X-rays showed a minor fracture, the cast a stark white against Caleb's skin. As it was applied, Julian's phone buzzed with boardroom alerts, urgent and relentless. You should go, Caleb said, his voice quiet, noticing Julian's distraction. We're used to fending for ourselves. The words gutted Julian, a knife to the heart. These boys had survived too much alone, their resilience a scar of neglect. I'm right where I need to be, he said, holding Caleb's hand, his warmth a promise. Back home, Naomi called, her voice tense. CPS filed an unfavorable report, citing your inexperience. Cassandra's objecting to the adoption, claiming your company's chaos makes you unfit. Fury burned in Julian, a cold, precise flame. She's using the boys to destroy me. At breakfast, the boys sensed his mood, their eyes wary. Are we trouble? Owen asked, his voice small, his fork still. Julian made his choice, his heart leading. I need you to come to a meeting tomorrow. Meet my team. He wouldn't hide them anymore, their presence his strength. The boardroom fell silent as Julian entered with the triplets, dressed in matching navy suits, Caleb's arm in a cast, their faces a mirror of Daniel's. Cassandra's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing. Gentlemen, ladies, Julian began, guiding the boys to seats beside him, their small hands clutching the table's edge. Meet Caleb, Owen, and Elliot Hawthorne, my nephews, Daniel's sons. Gasps rippled, the air electric. Daniel, the free-spirited twin, was a legend at Hawthorne Global, his death a shadow over the company. Impossible, Cassandra scoffed, her voice sharp. Daniel would have told us. He didn't know, Julian said, distributing DNA proof. The paper's a testament to truth. They're my family, part of this company's legacy. Chairman Stone frowned, his voice measured. This doesn't fix our financial mess. It explains everything, Julian countered, his voice steady, his heart open. I found 3 abused boys. I didn't know they were mine, but I knew they needed me. Elliot's hand slipped into Julian's, a gesture that softened the room, board members shifting in their seats. Cassandra says I can't balance family and business, Julian continued, his voice rising with conviction. But family makes me a better leader. He shared a plan for a new division supporting child welfare, his father's values reborn. This is manipulation, Cassandra spat, her face darkening. This is the future, Julian said, his gaze unwavering. He sent the boys to wait with Mrs. Carter, then faced the board, his voice resolute. Support my vision, or I resign and divest my shares. Today, silence, heavy and charged. Julian Hawthorne didn't bluff, his ultimatum a thunderclap. You'd walk away? Cassandra asked, incredulous. For my family? Without question. Stone cleared his throat, his voice calm. Let's review the proposal. Julian felt a strange peace, his choice a lighthouse in the storm. Outside, the boys drew happily under Mrs. Carter's watch, their crayons a riot of color. Still the boss? Owen asked, his eyes bright. Julian smiled, the answer matching less than it once had. We'll be fine either way. A Monday morning shattered their routine, the air crisp with autumn's bite. Elliot, usually a whirlwind of energy, lay still, his face alarmingly pale, his breath shallow. I feel bad, he whispered, his voice a threat. Julian touched his forehead, heat radiating through his palm, a fever's warning. Mrs. Carter hovered, her face etched with worry. Called Dr. Larson? Before Julian could answer, Elliot coughed, a violent spasm that shook his small frame, blood speckling his hand, bright and terrifying. Ambulance. Julian barked, his voice tight with fear, his heart a frantic drum. Caleb and Owen followed, wide-eyed, their sneakers pounding the marble as paramedics rushed Elliot away, the stretcher a stark intrusion. At the hospital, Dr. Amara Khan's face was grave, her eyes shadowed. Elliot has severe pneumonia, complicated by aplastic anemia. His body isn't producing enough blood cells. Julian's world tilted, the sterile walls closing in. Will he be okay? He asked, his voice breaking. We're treating him, but he may need a bone marrow transplant. Siblings are often matches, especially triplets. They're fraternal, Julian said, recalling the DNA tests, his voice hollow. Test us all. As nurses drew samples, Julian's phone buzzed. Cassandra, the board, a shareholder vote. Their demands a relentless tide. Without you, Cassandra wins, his CFO warned, his voice urgent. Julian watched Elliot through the glass, tubes snaking from his small body, his chest barely rising. Handle it, he said, hanging up, the click of severance. Dr. Khan returned, her face grim. Neither brother matches. We'll search the registry. Test me, Julian insisted, his voice a command. As an uncle, it's unlikely, she cautioned, her tone gentle. Test me, he repeated, his eyes locked on Elliot. Beside Elliot's bed, Julian held his limp hand. Caleb and Owen curled against him, their warmth a fragile anchor. Remember when you found us? Caleb whispered, his voice a thread in the quiet. Elliot said you were our angel, sent by Mom. Julian's throat closed, tears burning. I'm no angel, Caleb. You saved us, Owen said, his voice fierce. Now save Elliot. Julian prayed, a stranger to faith, his heart laid bare as Dr. Khan returned, her expression stunned. You're a near-perfect match, closer than an uncle should be. In her office, Dr. Khan spread the results across her desk, charts and numbers a map to truth. You and Daniel were identical twins, so your DNA is nearly identical. To Elliot's immune system, you're as good as his father. Julian's mind reeled, the revelation a seismic shift. Genetically, these boys were his sons, their bond deeper than he'd dared imagine. How soon for the transplant? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm within. Tomorrow, she said. It's risky. For him, rejection. For you, pain. Do it, Julian said, his choice absolute. Cassandra's text arrived, cold and cutting. Press conference today. You've abandoned the company. Another from Naomi. CPS resuming probe, citing your hospital absence. Julian silenced his phone, his focus on Elliot, his small form a beacon. Caleb stirred, his voice small. Is Elliot okay? I'm a match, Julian said, his voice a promise. We'll give him my cells, like a superhero boost. Owen's eyes lit up, hope breaking through his fear. Really, Julian said, hiding the procedure's toll, the pain a small price for Elliot's life. The hospital door opened, and Cassandra stood there, impeccably dressed, a photographer in tow, his camera a silent threat. Quite the soap opera, she said, her voice cool, her eyes calculating. The board removed you as CEO. I'm in charge. She nodded at Elliot, her smile ablaze. All for a kid who's not yours. You're wrong, Julian said quietly, his voice a vow. They're more mine than the company ever was. He ushered her out, her camera flashing uselessly, her power diminished in the face of his resolve. The transplant left Julian drained, his body aching, but he stayed near Elliot's room, ignoring doctor's advice to rest, his presence a vigil. Caleb and Owen shuttled between them, bringing drawings, their small voices a lifeline. Early signs are good, Dr. Khan said on day 4, her voice cautious but hopeful. Elliot's accepting the cells. Julian watched Elliot's chest rise, a faint flush returning to his cheeks, the first sign of life renewed. Naomi burst in, clutching papers, her face alight. Cassandra falsified board documents. We've got her. Can we use it? Julian asked, his focus on Elliot, his small hand warm in his. It's fraud, Naomi said, her voice triumphant. The board's reinstating you. Cassandra's out. Julian nodded, the victory hollow, his heart elsewhere. The adoption's approved, Naomi added, her smile rare and bright. The judge was moved by your sacrifice. Julian's heart swelled, a tide of joy. All three Hawthorne boys, Naomi confirmed, her eyes gleaming. That night, Elliot's eyes opened, clear and focused, his voice a whisper. You stayed. Of course, Julian said, tears pricking, his throat tight. Are we yours forever? Elliot asked, his voice hoarse but hopeful. Yes, Julian said, his voice breaking. Can we call you Dad? Caleb had suggested it, citing the supercells, a child's logic that pierced Julian's heart. I'd be honored, Julian answered, his voice rough with emotion, the word Dad a miracle. Caleb and Owen joined, piling into his arms, their warmth a family forged in crisis, their bond unbreakable. In a sunlit courtroom, Julian stood with his sons, Caleb, Owen, and Elliot Hawthorne, their hands clasped tightly, their matching suits a testament to their unity. Elliot, 6 weeks post-transplant, gripped Julian's fingers, his strength returning, his smile a beacon. Judge Clara Monroe reviewed the adoption papers, her gaze warm but probing, her presence a quiet authority. Mr. Hawthorne, you understand you're taking full responsibility as their father? I do, Your Honor, Julian said, his voice steady, his heart full, the weight of the moment a privilege. This case is extraordinary, Judge Monroe said, her voice measured but warm. Your biological tie as their uncle, your life-saving donation to Elliot, and your unwavering commitment despite professional upheaval. Julian's mind flashed to the past 2 months, finding the boys in the rain, their hollow cheeks a call to action, learning they were Daniel's, a truth that reshaped his soul, nearly losing Elliot, his small body a battleground, and sacrificing his company's helm, a choice that redefined success. CPS's updated report, despite Ms. Langston's allegations, confirms your dedication, the judge added, dismissing Cassandra's final, vindictive jab with a wave of her hand. She turned to the boys, her eyes softening. Caleb, Owen, Elliot, do you have anything to say? Caleb stepped forward, his voice clear, his brothers flanking him like sentinels. We want to be Hawthorns. Dad found us when no one else cared. When Elliot was sick, he gave him his cells, like a superhero. He makes dinosaur pancakes, even though Mrs. Carter says he burns everything. Laughter rippled through the courtroom, a gentle wave of warmth. Family's not just blood, Caleb finished, his voice steady, wise beyond his years. It's who loves you, always, no matter what. Judge Monroe smiled, her pen a flourish as she signed the papers. I declare these adoptions final. Congratulations, Hawthorne family. Applause erupted from Mrs. Carter, Victor, Naomi, and loyal board members, their cheers a celebration of love's triumph. Outside, cameras flashed, not for business, but for the story of Julian, the bachelor billionaire turned father, his legacy rewritten in the boys' smiles. What now, Dad? Owen asked, the word Dad a miracle that still sent waves of amazement through Julian. Pause for a moment. What does family mean to you? Share your thoughts or a story of love that changed your life in the comments below. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear how this journey touched your heart. 2 years later, Julian stood in a school auditorium, the air humming with anticipation, watching 9-year-old Elliot at the podium, his voice strong, his recovery a miracle. My family history project is about how we found each other, Elliot said, his words carrying across the room. Caleb and Owen beamed from the audience, their pride for their brother a tangible force, their bond a lighthouse. Elliot shared their journey, from that rainy night to becoming Hawthorns, his voice weaving a tapestry of hope. Julian's transformation had stunned the corporate world, his shift from ruthless CEO to devoted father a seismic shift. Cassandra's rival firm collapsed, her ambition no match for truth, while Hawthorne Global thrived under Julian's new vision, balancing profit with purpose, its heart reborn. He'd launched the Daniel Hawthorne Foundation, aiding vulnerable children, with the Triplets as its soul, their story inspiring others to open their hearts. Mrs. Carter, beside Julian, wiped tears as Elliot praised her cookie lessons, her role as surrogate grandmother a quiet gift. My dad's our uncle, Elliot said, his voice bright. But he gave me his cells, so I've got his DNA now. The crowd smiled at the child's logic, their warmth a blanket. Our real dad died, but life gave us a second chance. Chairman Stone, retired but ever present, clapped Julian's shoulder, his voice gruff. You proved us wrong, Hawthorne. Best madness I've seen. Julian grinned as the boys rushed him, Elliot waving an A+, their enthusiasm a tide of joy. At their brownstone, no longer the cold penthouse, but a home with a garden where wildflowers bloomed, Julian answered Caleb's question, posed as they walked through the park, the evening sky a canvas of stars. Do you miss your old life, without us? Julian knelt, his eyes meeting theirs, his voice steady. I thought I had it all, money, power. But I was missing you, family, love. Elliot squeezed his hand, his voice soft. Mom would love that we found you. Julian looked skyward, feeling Daniel's presence, a guiding star that had led these boys to him, their paths converging in a miracle of fate. That night, Julian found a note from Cassandra, tucked with a clipping of the Foundation's gala, the boys' faces bright in the photo. Daniel would be proud. Their reconciliation, slow and fragile, had begun months ago, a nod to their shared past, a bridge rebuilt with time. Julian sat on the terrace, the city lights a constellation below, joined by Victor, no longer just security but a trusted friend, his scotch glasses clinking. 3 years since that rainstorm, Victor said, his voice warm. Never seen anyone happier. Julian nodded, his heart full. Success wasn't his empire, it was the boys calling him dad, healing Daniel's loss, showing him that legacy lived in love, not buildings. The following morning, as he flipped dinosaur pancakes, the boys' laughter filling their home, Julian was no longer just a billionaire, but a father, defined by love, purpose, and the family he'd found when he dared to look beyond himself. Daily Narrated Stories brings you tales like this, stories of courage, redemption, and hope that change lives. Subscribe now, comment your favorite moment, and share this story to spread its light. We're racing to 1,000 subscribers, and your click could make all the difference. Time's short. Join our family, and let's inspire the world together.